I'm waiting for the first player to do the PENENKA. And
Benzema.
for the goalie just to stand there, hold and catch it into the breadbasket. Yeah. Hi there, you're very welcome along to the G Hour with me, Darran O'Sullivan, and I'm delighted to be joined in studio today by former Dublin footballer Barry Cahill, and joining us online is former Tyrone footballer Kyle Coney. Barry, how are things?
All good, Darran, yeah. Good to be here.
Of course, you're delighted. Big win the weekend, back to normal.
Yeah, it was a big win. I think a bit of perspective in terms of the opposition and playing against a mid-table Division 4 team. But I certainly did like the look of the vibe of the team and the energy, and a few key individual performances, which is encouraging given where they finished up in the league campaign.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit more Dublin-like. And Kyle, thanks for joining us. How's the form?
Form could be better. Yesterday's performance.
Yeah, picked the wrong week to get you on, I think, but it could be good for us.
Good week for you boys, bad week for me.
Yeah, so I suppose, look, we'll stick to it. It was a big game of the weekend. I suppose the big shock of the weekend. Look, at Derry, we talked about offline. Derry had a very good league campaign, but I don't think any of us saw this coming. Just the performance by Tyrone, 118 to 10 points. It was just so poor. Kyle, you know a lot of the boys, you'd know a lot more than we do down here. What was the thinking?
Yeah, well, the thinking probably was, as we said, go off air, Tyrone sort of got that game out of the way against Fermanagh. The sort of potential banana skin, the rustiness, blow the cobwebs off a wee bit for a championship, and leading into the Derry game, that was ideal preparation, but just very, very flat from the off-go yesterday. Derry brought a serious intensity to it. I just seen someone on Twitter before the match saying that Derry's warm-up was ferocious. They'd never seen nothing ever like it. So they probably caught Tyrone doing what Tyrone do. Normally like to come out of the blocks fast and turn teams over. And so it was just a really flat performance.
I was saying there, we had Cian Mackey on the show there a couple of weeks ago, and it was leading into the National League finals, and he actually suggested, that he thought Derry were tapering off at the league to start prepping for the championship, because he said their last couple of league games were a bit lacking energy, which wasn't like them. So, look, they hadn't won a game, I think it was 7 years in Ulster. But the performance had everything.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, like, for even Rory Gallagher, he's a very shrewd man, and in terms of preparation, he would add everything down to the absolute T. They looked excellent in Division 2, and they looked like favourites to get promotion. I think after the first 5 games, everything was trending in the right direction for them. I think the end of the Roscommon League game was quite controversial for them, because they could have got a free and the Shane McGuigan red card, and obviously I think it was the first half against Galway where they conceded 3 or 4 goals, which was very unlike them. But the funny thing was the fact that they didn't get promotion to Division 1, and the fact that they didn't get to maybe win a Division 2 league title in Croke Park actually played was favourable to them in one sense, because even though a lot of people would have felt that Derry would put it up to Tyrone, I don't think the expectations were there that they would actually beat the All-Ireland champions in their home ground. And also given the fact, as Kyle said, that Tyrone had got that championship game already under their belt. So the way things transpired towards the end of the league actually was something that worked out in the end for Derry. And they've been looking very strong the last couple of years, even going back to last year. They should have beaten Donegal in that Ulster Championship game, and with the pandemic and everything, and the fact that there was no backdoor last year, that really went against Derry, because they would have been very, very keen on getting a number of backdoor games under their belt last year to keep with that development after coming up from Division 3 last year. So things are trending very, very well for Derry at this particular moment. And I think yesterday's game, They came out of the blocks very well. Kyle mentioned the warm-up there, but they continued the first 5 or 10 minutes. There was only one team in it, really. They brought the energy, they brought the hunger, the motivation, and they were well on top. And I think even before any of the red cards happened, it only looked like there was going to be one winner on the day.
And Kyle, Barry mentioned there the red cards, Kennedy and McKenna. They were soft, needless, but personally I actually think they are red cards, not because of they're overly aggressive or anything like that. I just think it's a way of stamping all the silly stuff out of it. But I suppose, look, you're retired, you're a Tyrone fan, you must have been roaring and shouting when you're seeing them red cards, because they are soft and they are needless. But what was your own feelings on it? Would you be just saying no red card, or Would you agree with him?
I wasn't saying no red card as such, because as soon as you lift your leg like that, with the amount of eyes that's on the game, with it being on TV, that's something you get away with. I said to one of the fellas that was watching the game with me in the house here, like, that's something you get away with in a club league game where the referee is turned to head away for the free kick or blew the mark. But really, really silly from Brian Kennedy. And look, Garth McKinless is that type of player where he gets in your face. He's physical. He was really, really good going forward. But that's aggravation that Derry were bringing to the game. That's the wee bit of niggle that they needed to get up for the game. Not that they needed to get up for it, but where they needed to be to beat this Tyrone team. That's what they needed to play on the edge, and they done it really, really well. They were physical. They were any time they could slow up the play in terms of free kicks. They were cutting across Tyrone. It was a really, really good performance. The McKenna incident was frustrating as well. You know, throwing the ball back and hitting them on the head, like, it's petulant stuff, really. But it's frustrating, like, seeing it from a Tyrone point of view that we didn't finish the game with the full quota of players. But look, nobody to blame, only themselves for the two incidents, because, as I say, you're not getting away with those things in a championship game.
Yeah, and I think I seen after, I think it's 8 red cards now Tyrone have had this year in 9 games, which, look, that discipline isn't going to win you anything. And I suppose, look, we'll come back to this at the moment, but Tyrone can't afford to be without players because their squad is fairly depleted at the moment. So we'll go into the players that have moved on, but it must be something that the management will have to tackle with this Tyrone team to keep their head. And, like, they're in the qualifiers, you're going to have to be calm, be composed, because that discipline, it was there last year. It's just not there this year for whatever reason. So I'm not sure.
We seem to be having an issue with a bit of discipline. We're having a few players that's maybe try and throw their weight about now that, you know, they are being targeted a bit more, being the All-Ireland champions. The bullseye sort of moves a wee bit from them hunting everyone down. Now that everyone's going after Tyrone and trying to get in their face. But unfortunately, you can't react to them situations. You know, it's the old cliche, you have to go for the next ball. You have to be tuned in. And it seems to be that the Tyrone are tuning out a wee bit, and they're trying to get involved in stuff that they've no call to be getting involved in, and something that Brian and Fergal will have to address with the group, you know, because, as you said, you look into the bench and it's the household names are not there that we've been associated with down through the years, and we're maybe calling on lesser experienced people in championship games, and that's not where they want to be at the moment, like.
Yeah, and I always find with any team that I've been involved in, whenever the discipline is poor, it's normally because something else. Yeah, you're not playing well. You're just getting frustrated, or there's something annoying you and taking your focus away from the job at hand, which is winning the game.
We look at Conor McKenna, instant, really, really good impact off the bench against Fermanagh. Mm-hmm. I was surprised to see him start yesterday, and really wasn't in the game. Not that many players of Tyrone really could hold their head high today, but he wasn't in the game, and that was a bit of frustration whenever the free kick was blew and he threw the ball back. That was just, I would say that was more a frustration of the whole day and a reaction, a spur of the moment reaction.
Yeah, and look, it's nothing that, well, I've definitely done it a few times. I did it the weekend there. I got black carded, so I can't really preach anything. I'm not great at holding the head, but I suppose going back to Derry, and you'd have had history with Rory Gallagher, and he's a passionate man, and we're talking off air. I actually don't know how I'd react with a passionate manager on the sideline. I think most of my managers were fairly calm. I think it'd nearly put me off, especially if I was on their side of the pitch. But, like, you'd know him a lot better than me.
Yeah, I mean, that's Rory's personality, you know, and that's in his DNA. We played a number of years together in St. Bridget's, my own club. Himself and Ramey joined us back in 2002, and they played for 6 or 7 years with us and helped us win Dublin championships and Leinster club titles. But Rory is a club coach in our club at the particular time, and you could always knew that coaching was something that he was really going to get into, you know, full time, and you know, try and make a sort of career out of it. But in terms of that passion on the sideline, like, he's had it for a number of years. Going back, I remember, that infamous Dublin Donegal All-Ireland semi-final that I played in. Rory was on the sideline there alongside Jim McGuinness, and Jim was obviously very cool and calculated on the sign. Rory was the opposite. Any opportunity, he was nearly trying to get onto the pitch, annoy Dublin players, frustrate them, a few verbals or whatever, and I suppose try and distract the players in that sense. But I thought yesterday, I thought his passion and the energy that he had on the sideline was something that was very welcome in my view. I think it's a good thing to see amongst a manager. A lot of the top managers in recent years don't really let their emotions out like that. You would have seen that with Jim Gavin, very passive on the sideline. You would have seen that with Mickey Hart. Any time the camera would cut to Mickey Hart, he looks like he's very calculated and figuring out the game and the next moves, etc. But, I did like Rory's passion yesterday on the sideline, and I think the players probably liked it as well and tried to feed off that. And obviously, I think there was a clip of one of the Tyrone cornerbacks giving him a bit of a dunt at one point in the first half. And again, to a few minutes ago, we were chatting about the Tyrone discipline. Like, there's no doubt that they, in the Derry dressing room the week before the game, that would have come up in conversation, that we're going to get under their skin, we're going to annoy them from the first minute. They have these discipline issues. And look, whoever Tyrone play in the next round of the championship and the qualifiers, the opposition are going to do the exact same thing, because everyone knows that this is a problem area for Tyrone and it's not going to go away.
Yeah, and I suppose with Derry's style, I suppose Rory Gallagher's sideline style probably is fitting to that. I suppose if Derry were trying to play this high energy style and you had a calm manager just standing motionless on the sideline, it probably just wouldn't look right. So, look, they seem to be getting the balance and moving in the right direction. Yeah. Cahill, we're going to go back to Tyrone because there's so many questions at the moment. You might know more, you might not, I suppose, as well. But you were that player who you stepped away early and you came back. And it's a strange one after they win the All-Ireland to have so many players stepping away, and myself and Barry talked about it off air as well. When you're stepping away from the inter-county, it's all consuming and it is tough going. But these weren't players that were too old, they still had loads to give, and I always found it quite confusing. I know Darran McCurry came out recently, said they took the easy option and a few of them didn't like it, but what's the word on the street up in Tyrone? Are people talking about it? Because it must be disappointing losing that many players, because your squad just can't cope when you lose 7 or 8 players, because training, the intensity, the level of competition just drops with it.
It's a big talking point up here in Tyrone, where the strength and depth is something that we relied on last year with the getting to the All-Ireland final and coming through obviously against Mayo. But you can't lose that type of player or the calibre of players they've lost. Different if we have maybe someone really in the back room that walks away, that's got their All-Ireland medal, that it seems to be happy enough and look, done the training and done the work and haven't seen much game time throughout the league or championship. But probably, bar maybe Michael Cassidy, who was a household name under Mickey Hart in the last few years, Pat McGeary probably didn't see a big pile of game time, but the rest of those lads were all featuring at some stage. Mark Bradley started the Ulster final and was really, really good. Was probably unlucky not to play the semi-final against Kerry. Ronan O'Neill had been in and out of the team, played in league games, but takes it back to our A versus B games that every county has. Kerry and Dublin are the same, but our full back line of Michael McKiernan, Padraig Hampsey and Ronan McNamee probably are marking last year. Dara Canavan, Mark Bradley and Ronan O'Neill.
Yeah.
That's not there this year.
Or McShane was obviously on the bench last year as well, so they'd be coming up against him on every training session,
You've got a handful. That's most of those players will probably start on a lot of county teams, so the strength and depth is definitely a big issue, and we seen yesterday. I was always under the illusion that this was going to come to the fore whenever a game would be 110 to 13 points, and it was 55, 60 minutes. This is where it was going to come to the fore. Yesterday, probably we didn't see it because the game was gone at that stage, but when Tyrone go down the line, that's whenever I was worried about this was going to come to a head, and it obviously is affecting the training preparation, that intensity, that I'm going to take so much seriously. There could be a lot of players very comfortable at the moment, and look, if you start Cal McShane and then you have to maybe not start Conor McKenna, or you start one of them and you have to. Dara Canavan was the one that suffered yesterday, which me was a wrong call. I think we need Dara Canavan on the pitch when he plays, and he plays well. Tyrone can click up front. But it's definitely an issue. I'm not sure that any of those fellas will ever return. I know you said, Darran, that they weren't, the age wasn't with them, but I think they're all retired. Like, there's nobody we're going to see come back to the Tyrone. Maybe Mark Bradley, but the rest of them, I would say that'll be them finished up with their Tyrone careers. Like.
Yeah, and like that, you mentioned Darragh Canavan. It was a big surprise for me to see him drop, because he's one of the players that make Tyrone tick, because he's a bit different to the rest of them. He's a bit lighter, and he's a playmaker. He can finish.
Bit of an X factor about him as well,
And for me, McShane was so good off the bench last year, and he's just not hitting form. And we all know he's a super player. But when you have a player like McShane, who would probably be cross enough being left off, and comes on with that attitude where he's going to make a difference, like, that's invaluable. Especially like we said, they're lacking squad players at the moment. Look, they're being patient with him, but it's just not working for him at the moment. Sometimes you have to take a fella out of it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't surprised to see Conor McKenna starting. But I just think they got that call wrong. There was 3 players there, and I just think they got the wrong one.
Well, they don't seem to have the options, I suppose, which goes back to the strength and depth. But like, if you look at it last year, they probably relied on 17, 18 players to win the All-Ireland and get over the Monaghan game, get over the Kerry game, and ultimately the final against Mayo. And you had Canavan and McShane obviously having real impacts in those games. So, from a managerial perspective, after winning the All-Ireland last year, they know that they can't really rely on the same 17 or 18 players to win the All-Ireland this year. So you would be looking for the squad players to move it up a level and move up a notch. And for some of those players, you'd probably hope as well that, I didn't get to play in an All-Ireland final, but I've experienced it and we've gone through everything with it. Getting the medal is great, but I want to start in jersey. I want to be a Tyrone player that's in a starting team that wins an All-Ireland. And from a managerial perspective, you'd hope that these guys would push on, and there might be 3 or 4 changes to the team then come championship time. But with those guys stepping away, their options are so much more limited, and they just don't have the luxury, I suppose, in terms of keeping guys on the bench, or as good as like Myler is and McGreer, they still need to be pushed. It doesn't matter if you win an All-Ireland or an All-Star, you need to be pushed in every single training session.
If you don't have the backup, you do get complacent, because you just expect to start.
Yeah. And you might only be 5% complacent, but that's enough for you to actually, drop your performance.
Yeah, look, I don't think anyone's going to be ruling Tyrone out. I think I thought it might catch him later on in the year, but maybe catching him early, it might kick him into gear.
Might be a good thing for them.
Yeah, but I suppose, Kyle, I don't want to go by the whole segment without talking about Derry. Even though you're disappointed with the game, you must have been impressed with the direction they're going under Rory Gallagher, because just the energy, the skill levels, they just seem to be really in sync with what each other are doing.
I've been really impressed with their league form. I know that the last few games probably didn't go as they wanted. I think they were the first team to get to 11 points in the league and not get promoted. So they'll probably be, as Barry said, that disappointment of not getting to Division 1 has probably fueled the fire a wee bit in terms of, let's give this Ulster Championship a real rattle. They're probably the team that we've talked about the most in Ulster's last wee while, and them and Armagh, just with how they have turned the corner. They've got their Rory really suits, as we said it there, the energy they bring. That him on the sideline really gives them that platform to perform. They found a forward in Shane McGuigan who is exceptional, can score from anywhere, is now a real danger man. Previous years, we could always associate it Derry. We could have probably, up here with me, probably living so close to the border in Derry, we always talked about the players that weren't playing for Derry rather than the ones that were playing, So they've got the right, they're going in the right direction with their performances, but it'll be another step up again against Monaghan in terms of, how do we bring that same passion, because it's easy to get up for one game for Tyrone. It's a local derby to a lot of players. A lot of them know each other. A lot of them go to university. Now it's a different scenario for Rory. Can he take his focus completely away from Tyrone now and focus on Monaghan? But their form has been really, really good. It's good to see Derry back, in that regards, because it helps Ulster football. We now have them. We have Armagh, Monaghan, obviously there, Donegal, Tyrone. So it gives it's brought the Ulster Championship back from probably 2 or 3 teams now till there's about 7 or 8 teams that could all nip an Ulster Championship and be in an All-Ireland semi-final very handy.
Yeah, it's incredibly competitive. And I suppose you would have played your Tyrone career under Mickey Hart, who, was, we said earlier, just looked so cool and calm and composed. How do you reckon you would have enjoyed it under Rory Gallagher? Would he be your type of manager?
I would enjoy Rory now. I think the way that I think he only spits in his hands once or twice during the game.
Every 30 seconds.
But, no, he's passionate. Like I was speaking to him at one of the Tyrone Championship games last year. He has that aura about him that he kicks every ball with the players. So it's I think I would have enjoyed that type of manager. Club manager is a bit like that at the moment. So he's running up and down.
He lives and breathes it though as well.
Yeah.
That's the sort of personality he has. But I think for Rory, the next couple of weeks is going to be very, very interesting because it's a totally different dynamic in the group.
Expectations are high.
Expectations are high. A lot of people talking about them over the next 2 weeks. Lads can run away with themselves a little bit. Yeah. They're not going in as massive underdogs against Monaghan. It's probably a 50-50 game. And he really needs to manage the group extremely well, I think, in the next couple of weeks. And the training sessions this week, for example, you don't want lads getting too far ahead of themselves. People thinking there's an Ulster title there for you. Yes, that is the aim, but they probably had a bit of a siege mentality over the last few weeks in terms of the training and the motivation about going to the All-Ireland champions and trying to beat them in their own backyard. It's a completely different dynamic now in 2 or 3 weeks' time when they play Monaghan, so they'll need to manage that very carefully.
Yeah, like they showed in the game the last day, their skill levels were very good. They took their scores number out, but it is that intensity, that manic intensity, that aggression, that 100 miles an hour. That's
Tyrone
the
weren't
difference.
Ready for it.
Yeah, brilliant. And having skillful players able to run up and down and kick scores is great. You need to do that for 70 odd minutes, and they did that the last day. So it is, like you said, it's about keeping that mindset that, right, we've beaten the All-Ireland champions, but there's a realistic chance for all 4 teams to be winning this. And for me, I think the pressure is automatically on Donegal. So like Cavan and Derry are in great positions going into the 2 games. Now the expectations have risen, but realistically, Monaghan and Donegal are still going to be favourites. You wouldn't back against a Cavan and Derry final because we've seen what Cavan can do only a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was at the Cavan game last week, and I did have a big favour for Antrim just of how the league form went. I know both teams or Cavan won a league title, but I just thought maybe with Antrim playing their football at Division 3, 2 games to go in the league, they were sitting top. I thought they played really, really well against Armagh in last year's championship. There were 40-45 minutes in the game. It was a draw. So, but Cavan come out. They found a real star in Paddy Lynch up front. He kicked 8 points. He was exceptional against Antrim. So, look, you wouldn't back against. This is Rory's focus now for Derry. Then, when you look at it on the other hand, he has till now. We talked about siege mentality. Has to take their focus now and go straight to Monaghan. It's easy to get yourself up for one game, and we've seen it over the years. Teams can be nipped again in the next round because they've put so much focus onto one game.
That's the thing. We were actually talking about it off air as well, about how many games there were the weekend just gone, and you've hardly got them digested, and then you're on to another weekend and it's action-packed. And what I actually find, especially with them games, they're very emotionally draining. And getting yourself up to a certain level and trying to stay at that level consistently nearly every week or 2 weeks is going to be a challenge for a lot of these teams because, right, physically you can recover and get over, but mentally you have to kind of get your head in order as well, just go game by game. And like we said, they are coming thick and fast. It's actually quite hard to keep track of everything.
Yeah, and Derry lads probably need to come back down to earth very quickly, in terms of, because they didn't want to peak, obviously, for a couple of weeks' time for the Monaghan game. But the thing I like about Derry this year, and it's been obviously building for the last couple of years, that they do seem to be a very cohesive unit, which is something you wouldn't associate with Derry teams going down through the years. Now, I mean, we've all aware of very good individual Derry players that weren't committed to the county. and all the good Derry club teams as well, coming through Ulster, etc. So, they seem to have a very good collective energy amongst the group as well. And they seem to be very balanced as well. The spine of the team is very strong, with Rogers there, McGuinness and Glass in midfield. But one thing yesterday I was very impressed with was their full forward line. And the full forward line scored 113 collectively out of 118. And that's what they're there to do. Yeah. That's their job, is to score. But that's a very high return against a Tyrone team, 113 amongst 3 players. And McGuigan is the star man. I remember watching him in the Division 3 league final last year in Croke Park against Offaly, and he gave an exhibition, and you could see that this fellow was an all-star quality player. But there is a bit of help around the team as well. You had Doherty coming forward from wing back, kicking 2 very good points at key times as well. So I do like the balance amongst the group at the moment, and they don't seem over-reliant on one individual.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier about the AVBs and Tyrone, and who the Tyrone full back line would have been marking in training. And it's absolutely not the same
opener for them.
Exactly, yeah. And I suppose one last point on the game, I suppose, with the 2 red cards, I'd imagine they will be appealed. And it'll just be interesting to see how these appeals go, because that's
very busy with appeals.
That's another circus. I just wish they'd leave the media into the actual appeals process. So at least when
got good viewership levels for that now.
Pay-per-view stuff. But sure, at least then when they say, "Oh, look, Conor McKenna gets off," or Kennedy gets off, you'd say, right, he got off because of X, Y, and Z. Because inevitably they probably will get off.
They shouldn't get off. I mean,
shouldn't.
There should be red cards now. I don't know if McKenna will be suspended, given it was a yellow and a black. But I mean, Tyrone can't afford to be without any players going forward. Maybe hindsight, having a 5-week break and regrouping and not going through the front door might be a better option for this particular team. I remember going back years. Was it Armagh won the All-Ireland in 2002, and they got caught by Monaghan in the Ulster Championship the following year, but they were able to come back the longer backdoor route and got back to an All-Ireland final that year. So certainly Tyrone aren't out of it by any stretch of the imagination. No. It's a more condensed backdoor. I think they only have to win a couple of games to get back into Croke Park and into maybe an All-Ireland quarter-final. So, but the big issue for me with Tyrone is they look very flat, and the fact that they just don't have many options off the bench, and they're going to be very reliant on their key players.
Yeah, the next couple of weeks, Kyle, are going to be interesting in Tyrone, I suppose. Would you expect them to appeal any of the suspensions maybe for Kennedy?
I think, what is it to say? Appeal everything? Just
that's Eamon's advice anyway. Yeah. Appeal everything.
I hear Eamon saying that. So
maybe the GA should bring in what they have in soccer, whereby if you do an appeal that's unnecessary, that they double the suspension.
That's the thing, yeah.
It might put people off.
Yeah, I think.
I would imagine they're appealing. I would imagine that they'll be appealing just with the nature of how things are going with the minute with appeals. People can get off, so then they don't have the luxury of loads of players. So I would imagine that Fergal's well versed in the situation, so he'll be appealing them. I would imagine, because they can't be without any players, and especially two of their main players, Conor McKenna and Brian Kennedy. So they'll be looking at appeals in Croke Park, I would imagine, and there'll be a lot of talk over social media. You'd be sure of that.
Another sideshow, and I suppose other than the game up in Ulster the weekend, there was a big game in Leinster, blockbuster, helter skelter. Division 2 against Division 4. Sorry, I had to throw in that in. Dublin and Wexford. Look, it was pretty much, look, you can't read too much into it, but there was definitely a look of a crankier look in Dublin. They look focused. Look, I don't think the result was ever in doubt.
No.
But just they were back to being ruthless.
Yeah.
Exactly,
back to what they were doing probably under Jim Gavin against every opposition in Leinster for a number of years, and absolutely have to put in a bit of context around the fact that they were playing a mid-table Division 4 team. But I did like the look of them. They looked very focused. very energetic. There was a bit of a pep in their step. They were away a couple of weeks ago for a training camp there in Portugal, and the league is behind them at this stage. And look, you have Conor Callaghan back as well, which is obviously a key player. I mean, he's going to be the key player for Dublin this summer, absolutely. He's a total game changer, game winner, and I think for opposition coming up against Dublin with Conor Callaghan there, just takes the focus off maybe some of the other players, and it gives the likes of Dean Rock, Cormac Costello, Paddy Small, when he comes back in, a bit more time and space, because very few teams have 6 very good defenders that are going to be able to cover all of Dublin's forwards. So Conor Callaghan coming back, I thought he was outstanding at the weekend, and I would have thought that he might get off to a bit of a slower start, to be honest, because he has so little game time under his belt. He hasn't played for Dublin going back a good 8 months at this stage to the All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo. So his performance was very encouraging. 1-6 from play, could have got a couple of more goals, and Brian Fenton looked very strong as well, kicking 4 from play himself.
Yeah, and Kyle, I suppose Tyrone have won All-Ireland too, coming from Division 2 after being relegated as well. And I suppose the stick that Dublin got this year, it was very surprising, considering it was just a poor league campaign, and a lot of these Dublin players have 4, 5 and 6, 7 All-Ireland medals. So it's like poking a bear and waiting to see a reaction. And unfortunately, look, you have Tyrone All-Ireland champions. Everyone's been talking about Kerry as potential All-Ireland champions this year, maybe. And we keep poking that bear. And they just came out yesterday and they just looked, all the things that they did well for the last number of years that they didn't do in this year's league, they just seem to be doing the simple things right, Kyle.
Yeah, as Barry said, it's they can only play the team that's in front of them in regards to Wexford, and no disrespect to Wexford, it's just they're nowhere near that level. But we've associated Dublin with keeping the ball and taking the shots at the right opportunities, and that seemed to be one thing that stood out to me during the league. They were maybe pulling the trigger from places they wouldn't normally have done, shooting from down deep in corners, where traditionally Dublin would have held the ball for 1-2 minutes, no problem. Kieran Kilkenny would have got his hands on the ball maybe 10 times in that one possession, and they would have finally worked it into a place where they either won a free kick or they were taking the shot from a high percentage scoring zone. They seem to be back doing that. Brian Fenton was exceptional. We know how good he is in the air, but going forward, I think it was 5 points he kicked, so it was a really, really top class performance for him. And then we see, obviously, we have Conor Callaghan back in, and it's one area that they were lacking, up front. Just that, I don't know him personally, but he seems to be that number one thing is, I'm going for goal.
Yeah.
And
he has that killer instinct, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Second option is a point, and he has that killer instinct up front, and it's something that Dublin had been lacking throughout the league, just that cutting edge. But we are poking that bear, and they come out in a serious side. They lay down a marker on Saturday evening where they're definitely not out of this year's All-Ireland. And I think, there was talk of maybe people saying that Leinster Championship's open for someone else to win it. I think that Dublin are nailed on again, and they'll be thereabouts come the business end of the championship this year again.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there, Kyle, about their scoring. They were a bit looser with the efforts. They were going for a couple of the outrageous ones that get the headlines. And if you look back over Dublin's scores over their dominant period, you could hardly pick out many scores because they all looked the same. It was just patience,
Played
clever.
the percentages.
Yeah. And like some people do, like, oh, it's boring. It wasn't. It was intelligent play. It was patient play. They all knew their roles. You'd make a run. If you didn't get it, you continue that run and you get out.
Yeah.
That kind of deserted them a small bit in the league. Few fellas were just out of form, and that happens. But like we said, you're frustrating them.
Fellas as well. I think maybe that's not totally in the system that Dublin have been playing for a number of years when they won the All-Ireland for 5 years in a row. So there's no. You were trying, you fellas trying Larkin O'Dell, you were trying Sean Bugler, maybe who's been there a wee bit longer, but you just seem to see something very familiar on Saturday where Dean Roth would normally go deep into the corner, and that would attract the defender, and then they would come on the loop and just shoot from the edge of the D where he wants to be shooting from. And that was the biggest thing for me that stood out, that Dublin were back to playing the percentages, back to doing what they have known they've done for so many years, and playing to what they're good at. And they probably have a lot of really, really good ball players that are comfortable on the ball. Niall Scully, Cormac Costello, Brian Hurd, like every one of those fellas are really comfortable on the ball, where some other teams you mightn't just be as comfortable with so many players. So that's one thing that I like to see from Dublin, and it was evident on Saturday that they were back to doing what they do best.
Yeah, there's definitely no player in that Dublin squad that you can actually leave him have the ball, because they're all as comfortable as each other. And I suppose we mentioned there earlier, look, it's a hard game to. We're not going to judge them on it. We're not going to criticise Wexford too much, because the gulf in class really was there. What we were kind of looking for from Dublin was that ruthlessness, and if they were going to try something different, and they did seem to be trying something different with Johnny Cooper. Sweeping seems to be a funny word, maybe patrolling, maybe a small bit like Keane O'Sullivan used to do. I think replacing Keane O'Sullivan is close on impossible, but Johnny Cooper does have the experience. So it was interesting to see them doing it in that game where they didn't really have to, but it is about fine-tuning it back there as well, because obviously when they get to the latter stage of the season, it's great to have good forwards, but you need to have the back sorted.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, anytime you hear Jason Sherlock talk about his time during Jim Gavin's regime, obviously on Saturday going into the game, the result was a bit of a formality given the gap in class. But Dublin wanted to get something out of the game as well, and they certainly didn't want to, win by 7, build up a 7 or 8 point lead and then win by 9 or 10 points. They kept going for the full 70, 75 minutes. The players kept doing the right things at the right time. The shot selection was a lot better. And yes, they're obviously working on things as well with bigger games in mind further down the line. So I think for Dessie Farrell and the management team, it ticked a lot of the boxes in that sense. They were able to give a couple of guys game time as well, new guys. Lee Gannon and Tom Lahiff, I think both acquitted themselves very well. And, they are going to need those players this summer, because the strength and depth just isn't there compared to previous years when Jim Gavin had the luxury, looking behind him in Hogan Stand. These multiple All-Ireland winners that would be starting in any other county he was able to bring in. Dessie doesn't have that luxury, hence the reason why he had the blood guys during the National League, and blooding guys in Division 1 is very, very tough because it's so cutthroat and the teams are at such a high standard. But I think, he still did get value out of the league because he was able to try guys, and you could nearly rule guys in for the summer and rule guys out of all the different players that he tried. But now that they've got guys back from injury, Alex Khan that we mentioned, and I suppose the big thing there that you mentioned, Darran, is that defensive system, because they did look very vulnerable and exposed at different stages during the National League. If you go back to the Monaghan League game, the goal that Jack McCarran got that chipped the goalkeeper, like Mick Fitzsimons was basically there was 50 or 60 yards of space that he had to cover one-on-one. Like that was something that just never happened in the previous few years. So they do have to, it's still a bit to go in that particular area, but how they manage that defensive shape in the latter stages of the championship, I think will go a long way to Dublin winning on Ireland this year or not.
Even that goal you mentioned there in the league, Fitzsimon's reaction to it was so unlike Dublin, so unlike him. But I actually think it wasn't frustration that he thought there was fault. I think it was more frustration that there was so much space around. It was a case of
what's going on here.
I'm not used to this. But I suppose, look, I don't want to forget about Wexford either. Look, it wasn't a pretty game for them. When a game comes out, you'd wish it wasn't on TV. But I suppose for them, the big thing for them now is to actually don't drop the heads. They're down low in Division 4, but they have a good footballing history. And I know history matters nothing in the present, but approach the TAILTEANN Cup, Cahill, with a good attitude and get a couple of games, and then look, you can build on that and bring it into next year's league and push for promotion. And look, they got a win in Leinster, which maybe was a small bit unexpected, but they have an opportunity now to play teams out of a similar level, and hopefully they can not drop the heads too much and drive on and give it a good crack.
Yeah, it'd be very easy now to drop the head just on that performance. But I thought for 20 minutes of the first half, they were doing the things right. They were doing the things well. What they were doing was they were breaking from half back. They were getting the ball into the right areas. The final pass would let them down a number of times. Just when they were in the scoring zone, they tried to force one extra pass and get it to maybe something that wasn't on. But as you said, maybe now they can go back, regroup. They will be playing teams at a similar level in the Tailteann Cup, which I do think will be beneficial come the league for teams next year. You know, we always say that the league's probably our best competition because teams are not playing. You know, we don't have Dublin, we don't have mismatches in the league.
Yeah.
You know, we maybe have shock results to a certain degree, but we have teams all on a similar level playing each other, and that's what makes it most exciting. But Wexford, you know, they have a few weeks now to go back to analyse the game on what they did do well, which was running the ball. So look, it's a hard one for them because they'll feel as if they didn't do themselves any justice. That they'll want to have got more scores on the board, but the nature of the beast that Dublin was, they weren't there to be. Dublin weren't coming to play around, and last year I think, you know, it was only maybe 7 or 8 points in it. So we can see that Dublin are making strides in the right direction this year. But Wexford have time to regroup themselves, and hopefully they can make a bit of a run in the Tailteann Cup now.
But like Wexford absolutely should be targeting the Tailteann Cup. You mean, I was struck by a comment yesterday, even by Tony McEntee, the Sligo manager, and he said that they are going to embrace the Tailteann Cup because they want good matches at the right time of year against opposition that are of their similar standard. And I think it was refreshing to hear that from Tony. And I'd like to think that all managers and teams and panels should take that approach because, you know, what's the alternative? You know, play the odd backdoor game and get beaten in that, and then you're going back training in the horrible conditions pre-Christmas for a National League. You know, I think for Wexford, they should focus on the fact that they had a really good win against Offaly, you know, beating a Division 2 team, or team that operate in Division 2 this year. And I think you'd like to think that all of that panel will regroup maybe in a week or so and then target the Tailteann Cup and really go after it because, you know, the Tailteann Cup also needs these teams to embrace it as well. Otherwise 100%. It won't be a success and it'll be so much time and energy wasted on this particular competition. But, you know, why not go for it?
Yeah, but that'd be music to my ears when you hear the manager of a team going into the Tailteann Cup that they're going to embrace it because you want to play games. That's the whole point. You want games, and there's no point playing.
It's the only way to
games.
make progress.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
In the old system, we could have had maybe Wexford beat by Dublin this weekend. Backdoor system could have been drew against a Mayo or Tyrone, and all of a sudden that's the season over.
Yeah,
and that'd be demoralising.
It's no good for anyone there. How was your season last year? We get destroyed by Dublin, then we get destroyed by whoever else. So it is about the management and the players, of course, embracing it, and they should do because like that, it's going to be competitive games as well. But I suppose going back to Dublin, Jim McGuinness came out and he said that Dublin need to find a new approach. They have to be trendsetters that people have copped on. I don't think they do, if I'm being honest. I think when Dublin do everything, if you ask me what did Dublin do well over the last 5 or 6 years, I wouldn't say it was anything spectacular. They did the basics better than everyone else. I think most teams are pretty much as fit as they are, but Dublin just didn't lose the ball, so they were never chasing.
Yeah, their game management and things like that was excellent. Yeah,
so I don't think they needed a new approach. They were always going to get beaten. Eventually, someone was going to beat them on a day, and that's what happened. And then during the league, they had a poor league. Whatever, these things happen. But I don't think it's about reinventing the...
I don't think so either. In my opinion, Dublin maybe have gone a little bit too far in terms of being a possession-based team.
It's safe.
It's safe and, you know, playing the ball across the middle of the pitch and over the sidelines and quite lateral in their play. I would like to see them be a bit more direct, and I think they were on Saturday. And like... I mean, let's be honest, if you Coney Callahan inside one-on-one, why wouldn't you be direct? I mean, I remember watching, was it the Dublin-Kerry League game a couple of years ago in Thurles, and like every ball that went into Coney Callahan, it didn't matter if it was a long high ball or a low ball into the corner, into the D. You know, there's no such thing as a bad ball into Coney Callahan in my view. So I'd like to see Dublin be more direct, given that quality of players that they have inside. And I think teams did figure them out a little bit over the last maybe year or two, in that they have been that possession-based team. But, I mean, if you look at Dublin and any team really, you know, you're either a possession-based team or you're a running team or you're, you know, a more direct kick-passing team. And, like, every team should have that approach and that you're going to use those three styles of play at some point in the game. depending on how the game is going and the opposition and stuff like that. And Dublin are very comfortable in that place that they can play those three styles of play. But I would like to see them, be the more direct kick passing team, particularly when we get into Croke Park. Obviously, they won't be playing in Croke Park in the Leinster semi-final, but if they get to the Leinster final and hopefully playing all their games in Croke Park, then why not be direct?
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose Munster doesn't get much talk about, I suppose, in the provincials at the moment, and people just keep talking about Kerry. But there was a cracking game down there, Limerick and Clare. Two teams that are going to be competing in Division 2. Like Clare, for me, have been very consistent over the last number of years, and Limerick under Billy Lee have been taken step by step, and it ended up being an absolute cracking game. Like I see people on Twitter giving out that it should have been on TV, but just like that, when you put a game on TV, then it's no good. But the standard of football in it was absolutely exceptional as well. Some of the scores all over the place. Two very different styles of football, but it was a great game, Kyle. I'm not sure how you'd feel about stepping up for a penalty.
I think I would be happy enough to hit a penalty now. I hit them for the club, so it's probably just we did speak about it off air. If that game had been shown live on TV beforehand, people might have been saying why is the Dublin game not on? So you can't win in that regard. But in terms of penalties, I'd be happy enough to hit a penalty now. Under the circumstances, maybe slightly different, but it was. I seen a few of the penalties, and there were some cracking penalties hit in that game.
It'd be interesting to hear if they were practicing them in the lead up to the game.
Yeah, it actually would, because to be honest, it's not something I actually have been thinking about. Even the penalties, I just didn't think about it. But I'm waiting for the first player to do the PENENKA. And for the goalie just to stand there, catch it into the breadbasket. Yeah. But no, it was a super game, to be honest. It was a great game, and I was delighted.
Two evenly matched teams. Yeah.
And that's what it was. And look, obviously I'd be chirping on about both teams, because obviously being a Munster played against them on numerous occasions, and I've always felt that the likes of Clare don't get the credit they deserve. And obviously Limerick went through a bad spell, but they're on the way back. And I think Colin Boyle and Colin Cooper both said that, look, the excitement of it, but they'd probably prefer, instead of penalties, maybe having kicks around the D or the 45 kind of off the hands. Which one would you be leaning towards? I don't like the penalties.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I agree in the fact that the game should be finished on the day.
Yeah.
Obviously we've moved on now from replays in provincial championship matches and things like that. So I think replays usually ended up being a bit of an anticlimax, and obviously with the condensed calendar, they have to be finished on the day. Yeah, I can understand the point, maybe 40-yard freeze or something like that, but maybe one player hits a score and it goes over the post, and then there's contentious issues around that. Is there Hawkeye or what there? At least with the penalties, it's quite straightforward. I think there is obviously a fair bit of pressure on the players, yes, and it feels a little bit soccery that it goes to a penalty shootout rather than maybe using a skill that's Gaelic football specific. So I think it's something to probably look at for the GA over the next year or two.
Yeah, and I suppose other than that, Tipperary had a comprehensive win against Waterford, so that's going to set up Limerick and Tipperary in a couple of weeks. And I suppose Kildare versus Louth, I thought this was going to be a banana skin for Kildare, to be honest. I was expecting it to be a tighter game, but Kildare had a great start.
They did, yeah. They were right out of the blocks, and that was probably the winning of the game for them. And I think they went 7-0 up at one stage, which would have knocked Louth back on their heels. They did make a bit of a push on it until Kildare got that penalty and got the goal, and sort of saw it out relatively easy. Yeah, it was a potential banana skin, given the fact that the strides that Mickey Hart and the Louth group of players had done the last couple of years. It's actually two teams that will be featuring against each other in Division 2 next year, but there did seem to be a bit of a gap. And I think one thing that probably wasn't helpful to Louth was just the 1 week gap between the two matches. I think that was unfortunate for a lot of teams.
I think that's
winning
like
last week. Yeah. And also, opposition analysis. It's hard to, for a management team, you're probably getting the tapes out on a Sunday night, Monday, trying to implement a bit of a game plan, trying to give the players information on a Tuesday training session that you just, put together the previous day in line of playing against Kildare the following weekend. So I think that was a little bit unfair on those three teams that won the previous week in the Leinster Championship. They only got a week's grace there before they played. But Yeah, I think it's obviously, a good win for Kildare. I think they're trending in the right direction, even though they got relegated. I think they had a very good Division 1 campaign, considering it was, a big step up, and they were very competitive in all those games. And, it's a new management team as well. They're still trying to find their feet. They would have, still trying to get to know the players, and the players to get to know them. But I think it was a good game for Kildare to have under their belt. And obviously with the draw for the Leinster semi-finals, they're on the opposite side to Dublin. So they will be quietly confident that there's going to be a Leinster final there for them to contend in.
Yeah, and what actually stood out for me last day was the work rate by Kildare. I think they started as they meant to go on, and I think that kind of filtered in and out. They're a bit inconsistent with their work rate during the league. Their skill levels and fitness were grand, but it was just a work rate thing. And Kyle, I suppose Mickey Hart and the impact he's having on Louth, I'm not sure were you a Mickey Hart in or a Mickey Hart out guy, because obviously you would have played under him and probably had a couple of different experiences with him.
Mickey, look, he's really, really good at what he does. Like, one thing that I do think that Louth will benefit from having him and Gavin Devlin, and I think we can see it in their play at the moment. But going down to Louth, I think the one thing Mickey will put in place is a proper structure in terms of he'll get the S&C sorted. He'll make sure his backroom team is not lacking in any way. He'll put the right medical team in place. So I think Louth are reaping the rewards from a really good structure and knowing what a certain professionalism to a certain degree, and I think that we can see that. Obviously, they have some really good footballers, and we see what Sam Roy's doing in the league, the highest scoring player throughout the country. So that is one thing that I do think that we see that Louth are getting the benefit from, because having those two men in there, they'll not leave any stone unturned in terms of their preparation. They'll be meeting plenty of times during the week. They'll be doing their video work that we done, So, but from a Tyrone point of view, I do think like it was a time for a new voice, and we seen last year what way things went in terms of a fresh approach and a whole new setup in terms of the backroom team and everything. So I think that Tyrone reaped the rewards from that.
Yeah, and I suppose the only pity for Louth is that they're actually not in the TAILTEANN Cup, and hopefully for their progress that they get
a favourable draw.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose sticking to Leinster, we had a record down in Meath against Wicklow, 9 seconds. I think every game I've ever played, the last thing I hear is just start well, or mind the house, or get your house in order. Yes, keep it tight. 9 seconds, goal. I was there, what is happening here?
It looked like a preconceived move, training ground move. Reminded me a little bit of Owen Merchant against Kerry.
Don't go. Like we nearly did a whole show without that coming up.
But the thing that struck me was, like, where was the full back gone? Like, it completely opened up. The Meath player ran through from the half forward line and ran 30, 40, 50 yards to goal, and completely untouched. The two cornerbacks were obviously minding their own man and never edged across, which you should be doing. But there was a massive gap there from the throw in that obviously the Meath full forward had dragged the Wicklow full back out. So, that was a glaring error from the Wicklow side of it. But, it was a good win for Meath.
Do you ever get a goal that quick, Kyle?
Never got a goal that quick. I wasn't famed for scoring too many goals throughout my career. I think you were more of a goal getter, Darran, but definitely not me. I wasn't, unless it come off the post and I was standing in the right spot. I was scoring goals.
It takes me a while to warm up. I wouldn't be warm enough after 9 seconds to sprint for it. It takes me a while to get going.
I'd be the same as you.
But I suppose Westmeath had a big win in the division, and Ulster Monaghan had a big win, and Roscommon had a big win in Connacht. But like that, we're going on to another weekend where it's just going to be action-packed. Kerry and Cork is finally sorted. It's in Páirc Uí Rinn. I was chatting to a few. What were your opinions on that? Because it's funny. Where I am in Kerry, in Glenbeigh, it's all Cork people and Limerick people where I'm from, for the summer, and they're down, and like the Cork people were so fed up with it. I'd say they're just, because they're not going well in hurling, they're not going well in the football. It's just been a bit of a turkey shoot below there.
Yeah, and for Cork GAA, I mean, they've had their issues with the stadium as well, and the financing of that, and obviously Ed Sheeran has had an impact actually on the pitch as well in that sense. I read Darragh O'Shea's article there recently in the Times about the particular issue around Cork and the venue, and I always enjoy Darragh's articles. They're excellent, and he was very, very critical of the Cork players, and there was a lot of sense in it, in that, you know, I suppose now is an opportunity for the Cork players to really stand up. So they made a bit of a push and a stance for playing in Páirc Uí Rinn, and they didn't want to give away home field advantage. The likelihood is that there's only going to be one result in this game, and in that there's a high expectation that Kerry will win. But I suppose for this Cork team, and in terms of their journey, they nearly couldn't get any lower. But now is maybe an opportunity that they're actually going to show something. You know, the backs are against to the wall. They've stood up for what they feel is the right thing to do, and now they've got to do it on the pitch. You know, there's been a lot of talk about it, a lot of articles written about it, a lot of discussion on social media, etc. So I think the Cork players, let's see what they're made of on Saturday, and are they actually going to stand up for 70-75 minutes and give Kerry a real game?
Yeah, and Kyle, the Leinster Championship draw was made Meath, Dublin, Kildare and Westmeath, and their double header set for Croke Park. Have the Leinster, and they won't be on TV either, which is another argument as well, like, because I think there's hurling on. But have they missed a trick by not bringing it to provincial grounds there instead of everything back to Croke Park? I know I'm not asking Barry because I know where he's going with it. Yeah. But for me, yeah, I just think this year, even like, you know, there was the argument with Antrim and Cavan about Corrigan Park. It wasn't big enough. It was fine. Cavan did the business. Kerry Cork with Páirc Uí Rinn. We're going to Páirc Uí Rinn. Yeah. And it does give you more opportunity of an upset, but it does create a better atmosphere as well. So I think it's a pity, and I think it's a trick missed by the Leinster Council this time to have them separately and have them in, let's say, Dublin going down to Meath, or Kildare going to Westmeath, or Westmeath going up. It didn't matter. I think we'd have been in for better games.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that, and I think that we have missed a trick here. We go to Croke Park, a double header. It loses its appeal a wee bit in terms of teams. Dublin have, when we talk about Dublin have the advantage in terms of Croke Park. They know it so well, but Leinster Council, that game of Meath and Dublin would sell out a provincial ground, no problem, because Dublin probably not going as well as they had been throughout the years. Meath maybe senses the chance, if it is somewhere else other than Croke Park, to cause that upset, to get as many fans in, to get a close knit ground. I was at the Antrim and Cavan game that day, and there was big talk of, you know, it needed to be somewhere else. It wasn't even sold out.
No, there was very few there.
You know, it wasn't. I think there was only about 2,500 people there. It held a capacity crowd of 4,100. So, look, I do think that they have missed a trick here, and these games should have been at provincial grounds. It brings a better atmosphere. It brings. We go to Croke Park, we might only have 45,000, 50,000, where we go to the provincial ground, two separate games, 14,000, 15,000 people packed in. You know, that's what those type of games are missing, in my opinion. You know, that's from an outsider. Because in Ulster we normally do get those scenarios. Yeah. We get to go to Clones, we get to go to Armagh, the athletic grounds, a great pitch, great atmosphere. And I think it adds to the occasion, it adds to the game.
And I think Dublin players have come out in recent years saying they're happy to play anywhere. You know, I think the result will probably go one way regardless of where the venue is. But I think for me, psychologically, they've gone to Croke Park so many times in recent years, over the last 10 years in particular, and got a bad beating by Dublin and Croke Park. So psychologically, it would have been a boost for them if they're able to possibly not Navan but play them in Portlaoise or whatever that might be. But I think a big thing as well is for Kildare, they'll probably be happy it's in Croke Park as well, because that's for ultimately for where Glenn Ryan and management team want to get to. They're going to want to be able to be as comfortable as possible to be in Croke Park. They want to win Leinster finals in Croke Park, or Ireland quarter finals in Croke Park, so they will certainly be happier that they're getting a run out against Westmeath there.
Yeah, and I suppose as well this weekend we've Galway and Leitrim. Look, without being disrespectful to Leitrim, I think we'll all probably expect that Galway will come out on top of that. I actually tipped Roscommon for the Connacht, and my tips haven't been going well this year, so that probably means Galway are going to win it.
Neither my tipped Antrim and Armagh last week.
Yeah, but I'm going to go with you now, Kyle, because I want your opinion. Donegal and Cavan. Where are we going?
This Cavan seemed to be a bit of a closer unit than they were last year. They seem to have got things moving in the right direction as a unit. I just don't know if they have enough to take this Donegal side. I think that we see the likes of Rory Gallagher running from deep. Then you have McBrearty coming in the loop, who was quiet for the first 20 odd minutes against Armagh. Then just like a flick of a switch, he turned it on. It's a game that I see being close for 55 minutes, and just see that Donegal maybe winning by 5 or 6 in the finish up. But it's Donegal will be in a favourable position going into the weekend. I don't think that the Cavan have enough ammunition up front to cause them to bother for the full 70 minutes. I think if they get close on Paddy Lynch and they get a man marker on Garrod McKiernan, that puts out a lot of the Cavan fires.
Yeah, what are you thinking, Barry?
Yeah, look, I remember being at the Donegal Cavan Ulster final there 3 years ago in 2019, and there was a big gap between the two teams. Donegal were excellent that day in Clones, and obviously, Cavan caught them the following year, fully deserved Ulster title, did it the hard way, and won the Ulster title on full merit. I think that game is going to play in the back of the minds of the Donegal guys at the amount of criticism and stick they took for losing that game, because a lot of people felt that Donegal were the closest to Dublin and that they could really put it up to Dublin in terms of being All-Ireland contenders, and that game I probably still haunting them, and I think that's a big motivation factor for Donegal going into this game. And I think for Donegal now, we've already seen the 2 All-Ireland finalists get beaten. Their stock is rising on the back of the Armagh victory. If they are worth their salt and if they have genuine All-Ireland ambitions, they should beat Cavan relatively comfortably. And I think when you go down through the Donegal team, they've enough good players there that they'll be looking at All-Ireland semi-finals, possibly an All-Ireland final later in the year, and they should beat Cavan relatively comfortably, in my view.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think they should be beating them comfortably, and I think Donegal's biggest issue in recent years has been inconsistencies. But I suppose their recent history, being caught by Cavan a couple of years ago, should have them well tuned in for this game. But unfortunately, we could have stayed here for another hour talking about it, but that's all we have time for in today's show. A big thanks to my 2 guests, Barry for coming in and Cahill for joining us remotely, and join us next week for more Football Championship chat.